The land auction was held on a scorching afternoon in August, the kind of desert heat that made the air shimmer like water. Thomas Brennan stood at the back of the crowd, a quiet man in his mid-50s with sun-darkened skin and callous hands that had worked every kind of soil. He wasn't looking for much, just a place to expand his operation, something manageable and cheap. The frontier didn't offer much charity, and neither did the government. The auctioneer's voice droned through the list of abandoned properties, homesteads reclaimed, claims forfeited, squatters' rights dissolved. Most went for substantial prices despite their condition. But then came Lot 447. Dilapidated cabin, approximately 2 miles north of the Gila River, no working water source, structure deteriorating, condemned by territorial survey. Starting bid $1. Silence. 50 cents. More silence. The crowd had moved on, their attention elsewhere. Going once, going twice. Thomas raised his hand. 12 cents. The auctioneer blinked. No one else moved. Sold. Cabin 447 to Thomas Brennan for 12 cents. The other prospectors laughed. It was a purchase so worthless that even haggling seemed beneath them. Thomas collected his deed and walked away, unconcerned by their mockery. He'd learned long ago that the world's discarded things often held unexpected value. He rode out to the property 3 days later, when the heat had finally broken and the evening air carried the scent of creosote and sage. The cabin stood alone on a desolate stretch of land, surrounded by scrubland and rocks. The structure was indeed deteriorating. The roof had caved in on one side, the wooden walls were bleached gray by years of sun, and the windows were nothing but empty, dark hollows. Thomas tied his horse to a stunted mesquite tree and approached carefully. The front door hung open on rusted hinges, creaking softly in the wind. Inside, the darkness was absolute. He'd brought a lantern. He lit it, and the warm glow revealed the cabin's interior. Scattered debris, broken furniture, the remnants of a life abandoned long ago. But as his eyes adjusted and the light reached toward the back corner, he saw something that stopped his heart cold. A rope hung from the ceiling beam. At the end of that rope hung a figure. Thomas's breath caught in his throat. For a moment, he couldn't move, but then his practical nature reasserted itself, and he stepped forward to investigate. The figure didn't sway or shift. It had been there for some time. As the lantern light grew stronger, he could make out details. It was a woman, tall and broad-shouldered, with long dark hair and bronze skin. She wore a simple calico dress that had faded from what might have once been blue. Her Apache heritage was unmistakable in her features, in the bone structure of her face, and around her neck was a rope that had stolen her breath and her life. Thomas lowered the lantern, unable to bear looking at her face, and that's when he noticed something extraordinary. The rope moved slightly against her neck, and beneath it, he saw the faint rise and fall of her chest. She was alive. Thomas moved with urgent purpose. He pulled a chair beneath her feet and climbed up, working at the rope with his knife. It was tight, cutting deeply into her flesh, but he managed to cut through it. She fell into his arms, and her body was a dead weight, her skin cold despite the stale heat of the cabin. He carried her outside into the cooler night air and laid her on the ground. Her lips had a bluish tinge, and her breathing was shallow and irregular. Using the water from his canteen, Thomas dampened the cloth and pressed it against her face, working it into her mouth. For several agonizing minutes, nothing happened. Then she gasped. Her body convulsed, arching upward as her lungs suddenly remembered how to pull air into themselves. She coughed, a terrible, racking sound, and began to breathe, ragged and desperate, but alive. Hours passed. Thomas sat beside her through the night, making sure she kept breathing, keeping her warm with his blanket, waiting for consciousness to return. Toward dawn, her eyes flickered open. She stared at him with immediate terror, thrashing away from him as if he were a demon. "No," she gasped, her voice hoarse and barely audible. "No, please, let me go back." "You're safe," Thomas said firmly, keeping his voice low and steady. "I cut you down. You're alive." "I don't want to be alive," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to be. Why did you take that from me?" Thomas sat back, giving her space. "Because life isn't over. Because there are reasons to keep living, even if you can't see them right now." It took 3 days before she would tell him her name. She was named Tiny, and she was 28 years old, though life had aged her beyond her years. She'd been born on the San Carlos Reservation to an Apache mother and a white soldier father. The Apache had never fully accepted her mixed blood. The white settlers had branded her a savage. "I was married once," she told him on the fourth day, when she was finally strong enough to sit upright and drink broth. They were sitting on the cabin's porch in the fading afternoon light. "To a man from the reservation. He was good, and he loved me despite everything. We had a daughter." Thomas listened without interrupting. "Raiders came, white men, looking for revenge for some attack they blamed us for. They didn't care who was responsible. They killed my husband. They took my daughter. They said—" Her voice broke. "They said no one would want a mixed-blood child, that she'd be better off dead. I've spent 4 years trying to find her. 4 years, and I found nothing." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Then I came to this cabin because I heard someone had seen a child matching her description nearby. But there was nothing. No one. I realized I'd been chasing ghosts, and my life had become a ghost too. So I decided to end it." Thomas felt rage and sorrow war within him. "Do you want to keep searching for her?" Tiny looked at him with hollow eyes. "What's the point? She could be anywhere. She could be dead. The world is too big and too cruel." "Then we start smaller," Thomas said quietly. "We start with today. We start with this cabin. We're rebuilding it into something livable. We start with one meal, one breath, one sunrise at a time. And while we're doing that, we listen. We pay attention. We stay ready. Because sometimes grace finds us when we least expect it." For weeks, Tiny was fragile, both in body and spirit. The rope had left deep marks around her neck that took time to fade. Her voice remained hoarse, a permanent reminder how close death had held her. But slowly, incrementally, she began to heal. Thomas repaired the cabin, and Tiny helped. She was strong, stronger than most men, and she worked with determined purpose. They installed new windows, patched the roof, rebuilt the porch. Gradually, the abandoned structure transformed into a home. One afternoon, as they were working in what would become a garden, a group of travelers passed by on the road. Thomas saw Tiny stop, her entire body going rigid. A woman from the traveling party was riding alongside a child, a young girl of perhaps 10 years old, with Apache features and skin that suggested mixed heritage. Tiny walked toward the road without speaking. Thomas followed, his heart pounding. The travelers slowed their horses. The woman noticed Tiny's intense gaze and pulled back slightly, instinctively protective. "The girl!" Tiny said, her voice barely audible. "Where did you find her?" The woman bristled. "She's mine, legally adopted and—" "What's her name?" Tiny interrupted. The woman hesitated. "Naomi." "But—" "Naomi," Tiny whispered. She took a step closer, and the child's eyes widened with something that might have been recognition. "Mama," the girl said uncertainly. "Mama, is it really?" Tiny collapsed to her knees, tears pouring down her face as a child scrambled from the horse and ran into her arms. For a long moment, there was only sobbing and embracing, a reunion that transcended 4 years of loss and impossibility. The woman who'd raised Naomi exchanged a look with Thomas. "I found her in a camp 4 years ago. She was alone, crying for her mother. I couldn't leave her. I've been traveling, looking for any Apache who might claim her, but no one could tell me anything concrete." "You saved her life," Thomas said simply, "and you brought her back." Thomas helped Tiny's new family, including the woman, Margaret, who'd become Naomi's adoptive mother, settle on the land surrounding the cabin. Margaret had lost her own child year before, and finding Naomi had given her a reason to keep living. The three of them, along with Thomas, formed an unlikely family unit. 6 months later, on a warm desert evening, Tiny stood with Thomas looking out at the sunset. The cabin had been fully restored, and surrounding it were 3 other small structures, a proper house for Margaret and Naomi, a storage building, and a stable. "I was ready to die," Tiny said quietly. "I had made peace with it. I had given up. And now?" Thomas asked. "Now I have my daughter back. I have a friend in Margaret. I have purpose again." She turned to look at him. "And I have you. The man who saw value in the most worthless thing on the frontier, a condemned cabin and a broken Apache woman. Thomas took her hand. You were never worthless. The world just wasn't ready to see your worth. But I did, and I always will. They stood together as a desert sky turned from gold to purple to deep indigo, two souls who had been written off by society finding redemption in each other's presence. The cabin that Thomas had bought for 12 cents had become something priceless, a beacon of hope on the frontier, a place where the lost could finally come home. In the distance, a child's laughter echoed across the desert, a sound more precious than any gold or silver the frontier could offer. And beneath that laughter lay a truth that no auction or deed could capture. Sometimes the greatest treasures are found not in what the world values, but in what the heart chooses to save.